Hey guys, Dr. Matt Geller here.
And Dr. Brett Kestenbaum.
So we're the co-founders of CovalentCareers, and we're here to kind of teach you guys everything we know and have learned after helping lots and lots and lots and lots of practices hire optometrists and staff. At heart, we're a career development company. We help new graduate healthcare professionals with education mentorship and job placements. That's the biggest thing, and we help the employers obviously hire these folks. We're the individuals behind New Grad Optometry as well. I think today's gonna be pretty interesting.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. We have a lot of great information for all of you out there, and we're ready to present it. If after watching this full video you do have any other questions, you can always reach us at our names at covalentcareers.com, Matt at covalentcareers.com, Brett at covalentcareers.com, and we're happy to answer any other questions that you might have.
Awesome. So let's jump right into it. Brett, I was looking at our database to try to come up with a name for this, and about a week ago, it had been 4,022 practices that we have helped to hire, which is awesome, and it's shown how far we've come, and we've learned so much. And I want to start, the viewers with some fundamentals and understanding really not just necessarily tips and tricks, but the why behind everything.
Okay.
So let's talk about why is it harder to hire today than ever before?
Sure. So as you all know, the eye care industry was really built by the baby boomers. There's a ton of baby boomers who are now looking to get out of practice transitions. And what's really occurring now is that there has been a shift in the supply and demand curve. So over the years, there was always an oversupply of optometrists, and it was known that that was a major problem for people coming out of school. They weren't able to find jobs because there really weren't any available. So what happened at that time is that the schools stopped producing as many optometrists, and they really weren't growing the amount of optometrists that they were producing every year. Now what's happened is there's been a shift from an oversupply of optometrists to now there being an undersupply. So why did that happen? Well, it's because of the dynamics that were occurring in the industry and in the past, and the new dynamics that are occurring today. What's happening today is that there are several forces that are increasing the demand for optometrists being hired into practice at a significant rate. One of those is, again, what I mentioned before, which is the baby boomers retiring, trying to replace themselves in their own practice. Another one is that corporate practices are actually growing at significant rates now, so there's more stores opening, which means there's more opportunities for optometrists to be put into those practices.
You see it every day. 60 stores opening here, 80 stores opening here.
Yeah, exactly.
How is this possible?
Yep. We have 21 million new insured Americans from the Affordable Care Act, which was implemented just recently. So we have all of this new demand for eye care services as well, which has now increase the amount of private equity that's also coming into the eye care industry, opening new stores, and then replacing doctors within stores that previously had owner doctors that were within them.
I was on a call yesterday actually with one of our corporate clients, and it's really interesting. They're feeling the same exact pressure and addressing the same questions.
Yep.
And they know that the problem of this undersupply cannot be solved overnight. It is something that will take time, and it's also an emotional topic, though, because a lot of us are worried about new schools opening and acceptance rates and things. So it's a tricky one. Also, in populated metro areas, you find job seekers that can't necessarily find full-time jobs,
That's
but
right.
that's not representative of the country as a whole.
Correct. So you have areas like Los Angeles that have many schools in the area, and it's a desirable place to live. So the optometrists that are graduating there are having a harder time finding jobs. And ironically enough, Los Angeles being a place that has a high cost of living, where typically higher costs of living means higher salaries, the salaries there are actually lower because the supply of optometrists there is so high. But that's very few and far between. The majority of the country is having a very, very hard time finding new clinicians for their practices. Now, we mentioned corporate practices. So what's the advantage that a corporate practice has over a private practice, let's say? Well, there's a few of them. A lot of times the corporate practices are either able to or willing to offer these optometrists a higher salary, a higher pay rate. And the other thing is they have infrastructure. So they have a recruiting team. They have dozens of people who are actually out there talking to optometrists every day about positions. They're going and actively seeking these people out. They're calling up their database full of optometrists and they're asking if they're looking for new jobs and things like that. So they're ahead of the game. They're getting to these candidates before the private practice is able to. Yep. The private practice, in that same regard, is at a disadvantage because they don't have a team. If the doctor, for instance, is spending most of their days seeing patients, which likely they are, the doctor owner, they've got to wear two hats, both doctor and owner, and typically in a practice, the doctor side of things is going to take the majority of the time up because there's so many patients to see and they're the ones who are going to be seeing them. That doesn't leave a lot of time for recruiting. And one of the biggest lessons we learned, and what I can tell you, is that recruiting takes a lot of time, especially in this day and age. The candidates are not going to be knocking down your door because they're the ones who are more desired. People are knocking down their door with opportunities, asking if they'd like a new job or a new opportunity in the eye care industry.
So I guess let's just take this back to an action item. Why are we talking about this? It's because we want to let our audience know that this isn't as easy as you may think. Traditional means of doing this, like putting a quick ad out, even online, is usually not enough. We're going to get more into that. And overall, this needs to be taken seriously. When doctors out there watching this think about getting new patients in their door, they take a proactive approach to it. Same thing needs to happen here. This is definitely a topic that it's just not easy like it used to be. And we're in a new age now.
That's correct, and ironically, it's easier to get patients now because there's so many more of them, and it's harder to get employees to see those patients because there's so many less on the employee side.
Well said.
When you're thinking about hiring an optometrist, it's important to think about the return on investment, ROI. It's a term that most of you are probably very familiar with, being business owners. When you're thinking about your practice, you're always thinking about return on investment when you're doing things like purchasing frames and lenses and thinking about the margins that you need to make on each of these products. It's very similar when you're thinking about recruiting. One of the biggest challenge for practices, however, is calculating the costs associated with hiring when they're trying to figure out the ROI. Typically, when a practice is doing their calculations on what is this investment going to return for me, they're usually not thinking about things like turnover costs, the costs of acquisition, the costs of vacancy, other costs associated with hiring, which are more indirect than direct. And what we'd like to do is actually go over some of those costs with you. We've built an internal tool here. It's a simple calculator that will help you plug in some of the numbers from your practice so you can see exactly what those numbers will do to the costs of hiring, and then also will show you the return on your investment when hiring that doctor into your practice.
Yeah, Brett, so I'm going to go ahead and start the screen share here, and maybe you could take us through just a basic example. So I've handed the computer over to Brett here, and we're doing a screen capture, so let's kind of minimize us and pop this guy up and take you through an example. Now, this is a basic calculator. Look, there's a lot of consequences. There's all sorts of tax stuff. Your practice is unique, but what's important are the fundamentals, and we're going to get to them here so you understand. And there's a set of 4 directions which will help you through this with a download link in the notes here.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's just take you through this very simply. And again, like Matt was describing, every practice is different. So we've put a bunch of different variables on the left side here, which you can see all of these cells that are highlighted in yellow. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Excel. This sheet's going to just have simple formulas, calculate all different fields, and we can see at the end what the costs associated with this hiring process are, and then what the return will be in the short term and then also in the long term.
And let's use a conservative example.
Sure. So let's say your average, in this example here, let's say your average revenue per patient is $200. And the average number of patients that the doctor is going to see per day is 15. And the average days that the OD works per week, let's say we'll just put that at 5, which is about average. Now, when we're looking at the cost of vacancy, we're trying to see how many weeks are we going without a doctor.
So does that basically mean here that it's the time of the vacancy being open to the time we hire, which we know in practices is huge. We've seen practices go without doctors for a year, but on average, we're definitely seeing practices go without doctors for 3 months or more, I'd say.
That's correct. So think of this as your opportunity cost. If you were to see a patient which was trying to book an appointment with you but wasn't able to because you didn't have a doctor to see that patient, how much revenue would that patient have brought you in? And that's the amount of opportunity cost that not having a doctor has brought to your practice.
Let's go with something conservative.
Okay, so let's just say 10 weeks here. It took you 2.5 months to find a doctor. And when you bring a doctor in, let's just say in the first month they're 50% productive. And then in the second month they are 50% as productive as well. in the third month, they're up to 95% productivity, and then the fourth through forever, they are 100% productive in their work.
Now, I'd say when I first joined a practice, I wish I was that productive. So, I think the ramp up is unique for every practice. If you've got a great system, you may want to make those numbers a bit more adjusted. But I'd say this is pretty good, good consensus.
Yeah, and a lot of times we think we can ramp doctors up faster, but sometimes it's really just not the case. So in my opinion, I always like to plan for the worst and hope for the best.
I like it.
So let's just continue down the calculator here. In this example, we'll have an optometrist's annual salary at $110,000. Again, you could change any of these numbers. Monthly health insurance premium offered by your company is $300. The PTO days you offer is, let's say, 14 for the year. We'll move it up from that 7.
That's pretty good. I'd like to work for you.
Yeah, assumed annual profit margin for a single dollar. Let's just call that our net margins there, 25%. Now we're looking into advertising costs. So what does it cost us to advertise the position?
Yep.
Let's just say this is $249 per month. And obviously we're going to be calculating that for 2.5 months here. That's how long it took us to find this doctor. Costs of interviewing and screening. So this is a forgotten cost as well. How many hours are you spending, or is your staff spending, interviewing doctors, whether on the phone or in the office? All of that has to be factored into your costs, because that's productive time for your other staff members that is not able to be done doing other things, and you have to pay those hourly wages.
Yep.
Total interviews conducted, so let's say you interviewed 5 people. Average interview time is 30 minutes, which is relatively low if you're bringing them in. And then total applications screened are 40. And let's assume it just takes 5 minutes per application to actually screen that and go through the full process that you're going to need to.
I'll take it.
So in this example, let's start from the top here. We have on the left side, we have total based on associated hiring costs. And then on the right side, we have 12 months of full productivity comparison. So on the left side here, we have this cost of onboarding baked in. We've got that cost of vacancy baked in. And then on the right side, this is your long-term calculation. So again, this is your short-term calculation over the 12 months that would have started at the beginning day of this vacancy. And then this is where your doctors will be once they're ramped up for, let's say, that next 12 months without having to calculate in that cost of vacancy, the cost of onboarding, and then, again, all of those associated costs with that hiring process. So if you take a look here, your costs of hiring are very heavily weighted in that vacancy cost, and this is what so many practices miss. It's very important that you are trying to find the right doctor in the right amount of time, because vacancy can cost you a lot of money. And why is that? It's because your optometrists are your producers. If you don't have optometrists, you can't see patients. It's just like other organizations, their salespeople are their producers. If you don't have salespeople, you can't have revenue. And then the onboarding costs, because these people, the employees that you're bringing in, are less productive, you also have to factor that in. You've got these productivity costs, those costs of onboarding, $48,000. So your total costs of hiring, $199,039. Now, what's interesting is, what will a typical practice think were their costs of hiring? They would think this was their cost of hiring, this $249 that are spent on advertising the position. But as we can see here, that's incredibly negligible compared to the other costs that we're hiding that we actually didn't see.
Yeah, I think this is more deliberate even so if there is true vacancy, but a lot of doctors will say, well, I never had a doctor before, so I'm not losing that. But I'd ask that doctor to think through a growth mentality and push your practice for excellence and towards growth, because you are leaving money on the table there. You can't produce the revenue if there's not a doctor seeing patients. And I understand your market, you may not have your schedule full, but you got to start somewhere, and you got to start now.
That's correct. And a lot of practices, they forget to really see what they have in front of them. So think about your practice as an investment. If you have patients knocking down your door, you have a ton of investment opportunity there. If you were to, let's say, take $100,000 and put it in the stock market, what's your average return going to be? It's going to be something like 4 or 5%. But if you put that money back into your practice, you're going to be looking at something like 17 to 22% annually, spitting you out that in a cash dividend, time after time after time. And it's also going to increase the sale value of your practice in the end, because you're going to be both increasing your top line revenue and your bottom line revenue as well.
Got it. So let's summarize the end point here. Looks like there's some stuff if we scroll down a bit, right?
Sure. So at the bottom here, it's just a summary of what I just described, which you have the numbers up here in this area as well. But in this specific example, your total realized cost of vacancy was $150,000. Your total realized cost of onboarding was $48,000. Your potential daily cost of vacancy, if we just broke it out into a day, is $3,000. And let me just show you where that comes from. That comes from this $200 times this 15 patients per day. That's $3,000 of vacancy cost.
Yep.
And then your potential weekly costs of vacancy is that $3,000 times that 5 days per week.
Yep.
So every day that goes by that you don't have this doctor working is costing you $3,000, and every week that goes by, it's costing you $15,000 in potential top-line revenue.
So Brett, take me through a situation where we're in a growth situation, where a doctor has just been a single doctor practice, they want to bring someone on, but that doctor isn't going to get busy for quite a while. And I want to make the case here that it's equally as important to think about opportunity costs when you're in a growth scenario, not just an attrition or vacancy scenario.
Absolutely. So let's say you want to bring on a doctor and they are only going to be seeing, let's say you only have 5 patients per day for them to see, as opposed to that full book of 15 patients or whatever that might be.
That was my situation, by the way, in a growth scenario, and I don't even know if I brought in average revenue of 200 because I wasn't very good. Let's lower that too, see what happens.
If we're lowering here, so $150.
Sure.
Say $150 per patient. Let's see what that looks like per day and per week. So that's $750 per day, $3,750 per week, and then in this scenario, over 10 weeks of not having that doctor, we're losing 50,539 doctors.
I mean, 50 grand right there, that's money you could have been investing in inventory, in advertising to get new patients in, a variety of things. It's money you could have been using to pay down practice debt. So, all right, so now we can let's zoom back out to us. This calculator will be available for everyone, but we want to get across the point here that in the rest of our discussion, as we're going through this, you guys need to think about ROI. If you're not thinking about ROI, you're focused too much on the short term, what does it cost me today versus the opportunity cost. And I would say the practices we see who fail the most have the wrong mentality. They're worried about what it's going to cost them today rather than what they're potentially leaving on the table.
That's correct. So a good way to look at it is price versus cost. The costs are what are in this actual calculator here. The price are things like $249 or $10,000 or whatever the actual price of a service might be.
Yep. All right, we put the computer away. We're ready to get back into it.
Absolutely.
I think one of the things that worries me most when people think about their hiring process is when they're about to begin. So many practices are starting way too late. I think we were just talking with one of our sales individuals before who was saying these practices think they're going to put up a job ad and 10 or 15 days later there's going to be a position filled. Right. When in fact that's not the case. There's a longer amount of time. So tip number 1 is to start early. Here at Covalent Careers, we're not hiring optometrists per se. We're hiring salespeople, recruiters, marketers, but the majority of our positions we leave open year round, because we're always looking for that one great piece of talent. I mean, imagine the perfect person was ready to find a position with you, but you didn't have your ad live. I mean, you can really be looking at a game-changing situation finding the right person. There's nothing wrong with leaving an ad open. I think a lot of practices think, well, if I have an ad open, then I'm forced to hire. Right. You can be transparent in your ad. We're always looking for the right people because our organization strives for greatness. Happy to interview the right people, and you're going to be turning down 99% of people. But if that right person comes along, you'll find the money to bring them on and make it happen.
That's correct.
Thoughts?
Yeah, so let's just bring our thought process back to the calculator that we just saw and the consideration of those things like vacancy costs. But also, we need to bring our minds back to ROI. And one of the important things to consider in the hiring process is not only those costs of vacancy and those costs of onboarding, but then those costs are compounded by the cost of turnover. So think about a situation where you've just spent 3 months trying to find a doctor. You sped up that search because you just wanted to bring someone in. Then you have a turnover.
The warm body syndrome. I just want a warm body.
Exactly. Then you have turnover. Now there's so many things that happen. First, staff morale goes down because they were excited to have somebody in who's going to take some of the load off of them, and it's going to increase productivity in the office. And then the turnover happens. So you've got the morale going down.
You got patients who now saw one doctor and need to see another. You've got all your coding and billing and credentialing and all the logins and all the systems.
That's right. So any of those systems that you had to set up, all those extra things that you do during onboarding, they're all kind of wasted. And not only wasted, but you need to redo those things. You need to retrain people. And you have a staff who's thinking, you know, why are these things happening? So a lot of stuff can happen. And sometimes when you see one turnover, you start to see multiple turnovers. So it's very important that you consider a hiring process that's standardized and helps you get the same result time and time again.
So one, start early, and two, I think you need to get your job ad out everywhere. We talk to people, and we hear it all the time, and they say, I'm just going to post here for now, and we'll see what happens. Or, you know, I posted on this site. I'm not going to use your services today because I think that will win.
Yep.
And that boggles my mind because the game here is to be everywhere. It's to have frequency and to really be everywhere. And that's what we do actually at Covalent Careers. We help to market in a very, very big way our customers' jobs. And we put them everywhere. And so not being everywhere, you really decrease your chances of getting picked up on by the right candidate. The third overall tip here, if we can round it out to 3, is around marketing your position. It's really interesting to see how few practices think about marketing their position like they do think about patient marketing. In both situations, you're bringing people who don't know about you to know about you. With patients, you're saying, let me put out Facebook ads, let me do social media, let me go to community events, etc., to bring those patients in. Referrals, business cards, that's
Right.
how you've grown. I mean, think back to the early days of your practice. It was, you know, on pounding the pavement, getting it done. And it's the same exact thing with candidates. And I think as practices, we think, well, you know, I'm established, they'll just come, the ads will work, this is what everyone does. But the people who really recruit the best talent, they're absolutely using every marketing vehicle available. Now, here's the problem. A lot of practices don't necessarily understand how to market their positions.
That's
and
correct.
maybe if you're very savvy with marketing, you get it and you try some really cool stuff. But I'd say the average practice has trouble. Tips off the bat is going to be whatever you're doing for patient marketing, you can pretty much do the same thing to recruit talent. Social media, ads, community involvement, speaking with friends, referrals, etc. Now, here's, you know, kind of transitioning into the next topic, recruiters. I think recruiters get a bad rep. Here, they're talent acquisition specialists, and we do recruiting all the time, and it's by far our most successful service that we offer, without a doubt. Why? Because we start early, we get your job everywhere, and we market the hell out of it. You know, this organization is a fairly marketing first and began from marketing type of organization. So when we think about, you know, our customers' positions, we're doing everything we can to market those positions. For example, on newgradoptometry.com, which sees probably around 100,000 unique visitors per month, that's millions, you know, 1.2 million per year. Every time that someone's reading perhaps an article on vision therapy or the latest new instrument that came out, they're also impressed upon with your job ad or with the ability to at least see your job ad. That's marketing. We're getting to this new generation. I think new graduates are a great generation and, you know, the most hireable generation right now. So, I mean, I just love marketing. What do you think?
I think it's very important, and I do think that a practice, one, downplays the importance of marketing for your staff and for your team, and the importance of your brand when it comes to the community of people who you are trying to hire. We think about our brands in terms of our customers, but we usually don't think of our brands in terms of our internal teams. And the other side of things is that a lot of times, like described earlier, is either the practice manager or the doctor owner doesn't have the time to do these things. And like Matt was describing before, that's where a recruiting organization, whether it's our recruiting organization or another organization, can really help you out, because they are going to be focused on doing the things that they need to do and doing them right. So they're going to be installing a very specific system of how they're going to be screening the candidates, helping you through the interview process, describing to you what type of questions to ask, the things that you're supposed to be looking for when you are talking to these candidates in interview format as well. The offer process is huge. So getting the offer process right is massive. Unfortunately for practices, it's a candidate's market, and the candidates are going to get a lot of offers because there's a lot of jobs available. It's very important that you get that offer process right. You can even think about it as like an agent who is going to negotiate a football contract. There's a reason that those things exist. It's because there's power in doing the process specifically around that offer in a very good way to help you be the practice that's chosen.
Yep.
So thinking about those things as well.
Now, what are the common rebuttals we hear against recruiters? And I think at first we started as an organization who actually didn't like recruiters either until we found out that this was actually by far the best way to get the best talent and improve your ROI, right? So I think at first people are like, well, it costs too much, so I don't want to do that. But once again, we've shown that ROI side of things. Why else is, and you're running the recruiting team here, what is the main value benefits that your recruiting team brings to our customers?
Yeah, so the bigger things that you're going to see when you work with a recruiting organization is they're going to be focusing on the right people. So as opposed to just focusing on bringing you anybody, they're going to be, again, going through a process. They're going to be finding people who are going to fit exactly what you need. They're going to be helping you through that interview process so you can make those right decisions. They're going to be helping through the offer process so that when you do have an offer and a candidate that you want, you're able to essentially win that battle. You're going to win that candidate over, as opposed to the store that's located 15 miles from you, but their offer process was more appealing.
What about sourcing? I think that's one of the biggest things. I mean,
yes.
You know, we had everyone be quiet for a little bit. They got to get back to phone calls. Let's talk about sourcing and volume.
So sourcing is huge. Again, there's a very limited pool of candidates that are available for jobs.
Especially now, it's September.
Yeah, so September is from really the end of September to the end of the year and into January is when you're going to have a very hard time finding doctors, because there's not that many doctors who still don't have jobs. So the only way you may be able to find a doctor for your practice is if either someone is moving to a new state, or if they're not happy with their current position, or someone was actually just, let's say, taking a vacation or a break for a few years and didn't go back to the same practice they were working at. You're not going to find those people. You're probably not going to find the new grads, because the majority of them are going to have jobs.
Yep.
And the other situation that you run into at the end of the year is most people are focused on holidays and vacations and not changing jobs or thinking about those type of things in as much of a way that they might have been in the beginning and middle of the year.
And that's when you need them most. Those are some of your busiest times.
That's
when
correct.
You're doing, great discount sales and your inventory is moving.
Yep. So being incredibly proactive is huge.
Okay, so back to sourcing.
Yes.
I took you away from it.
Yes.
Yep.
So sourcing, you've got to be on the phone with at least 100 people per day to find maybe one person per day who maybe is interested in the opportunity. And it gets harder and harder to source candidates as the population density in your area gets smaller and smaller. So if you're looking for candidates in New York City, you're going to have a bigger pool of candidates to look through, even though they may be employed or whatever it might be. Whereas if your practice is located in Fargo, North Dakota, sourcing actually takes on a lot of a much different flavor there. Really, if you're sourcing for a practice that's in a rural area, something like a Fargo, North Dakota, or wherever it might be, timing is everything. And you are going to potentially be at the whims of finding the right candidate who's in the right circumstance at the right time, who may either be moving to Fargo, North Dakota, or who wants to move to an area that has a more rural feel to it, maybe enjoys colder environments or a specific type of lifestyle. And how are you going to find those candidates? By being in that right place at the right time, which is why we express you need your job ads open all the time.
Yep.
If they're searching for jobs, you want them to find your job. More so with those job ads, you need to make sure that those job ads are optimized for search engines for the specific terms that you are looking to be optimized for. And you also need to make sure that they're optimized for mobile devices, because over 80% of job seekers start their search on mobile devices nowadays, which is very important to know.
Yep.
If you format your job into just a single paragraph, people aren't going to read it because it doesn't read well when you're scrolling through your phone. But if you're cutting things down into small chunks, very small paragraphs, maybe 1 or 2 sentences with bolded headings so people can just see what is this paragraph about as a scroll, and then bullet points so that people can read it very fast.
It's got to look good.
It's got to look good. You're going to have a lot more success if when someone's looking at that job ad on a mobile device, they're able to easily read through it and navigate the different sections.
Yep. Nowadays, a lot of the job seekers out there, they're very purpose driven. They want to be part of something that's bigger than them. Yes, paychecks are important. Yes, great patient care is important, but they want to feel like they're part of something. This is a great day and age for that type of thing. And what I mean by that is if your practice doesn't have its mission, its purpose, its core values down pat, now's a time before you even get started with hiring to or simultaneously, get those things in order. Because if I'm a candidate and two offers are fairly similar, I'm absolutely going to go with the practice that seems to have their mission, their purpose, their team aligns, and something bigger that I'm working for. I feel like every practice out there, the mission statement is something around, helping our community see. And there really needs to be more thought into that. When candidates come here to interview, they really fully understand what we're all about. It's a passionate cause, and they're actually willing to take less of a salary to fight for this startup, to fight for this growing company that's got a bigger purpose. And so I think that's absolutely critical to do. If you need support in doing that, I would say look at the book Scaling Up. That book is excellent. It gives you a variety of worksheets that you can work through to form your core values, your big, hairy, audacious goal, your X factor, all these differentiating things. And not only will that help you hire, but man, that's just going to help you grow, period. But all of these things are intertwined, and they're absolutely key to get right. But once again, don't underestimate. A candidate's not just going to come in and you're going to be like, this is the benefits, you're going to see patients, see you later. These folks, these doctors, they want to be part of something bigger. That's probably the reason they joined the profession in the first place, is to make an impact. Your practice needs to show that you're making an impact in your community in a big way.
That's correct. And one of the biggest challenges in hiring in the eye care industry now is that a lot of the hirers are baby boomers. They're from a different generation. And a lot of the people being hired are millennials. The truth is that now is different than many times in just in general in the workforce, because you have three different generations that make up almost 99% of the workforce itself. Usually you have about two generations that are making up an overwhelming majority, but at this time you have three generations, and each of these three generations responds to marketing differently. Each of these three generations have different values. Each of these three generations has different goals, career goals, and things like that. And all this needs to be considered when you are looking for the candidates. So what happens is a lot of times the millennials aren't understanding how to find the baby boomers, and the baby boomers aren't understanding how to find the millennials. And then even when they find each other, the millennials don't understand how to communicate with the baby boomers, and the baby boomers don't understand how to communicate with the millennials, because they don't get each other, which is totally understandable. Yep. Like, think about how things are if you have children, or if you don't have children, think about your parents. Think about how much they didn't understand you. It's because you grew up in different times. You grew up in different generations. You might have grown up where cell phones and Facebook were super popular when you were very young, or you might have grown up when playing games like stoop ball and kick the can were the thing that you were doing when you were very young. So it's much different, and it's very hard for people to understand each other from a subconscious level, that inherent feeling of I can relate to you.
Yep.
So those are really things that you need to consider. Study the understanding of the different generations. Learn how to speak with people who might be different than you. Those things are important, and they'll go a long way.
For sure. Especially important as your patient population goes through that same thing. You want docs that speak the language of your patients.
Oh, big time. rapport is key.
So let's wrap it up. I think we can talk about salary and why your salary sucks. What's going to happen when there's a supply and demand market? Prices rise, and that means the prices here are rising in favor of the candidate.
That's correct.
To attract talent, one of the most important things that matters to young optometrists is absolutely paying off those loans. And 8 years of college, and ultimately we're ready to make some money. Mm-hmm. And we are seeing a lot of offers go to the highest bidder. Maybe it negates a little bit of what we just said, maybe not. This isn't just a one-size-fits-all rule, but I think that the private practices out there can compete by increasing that salary. So, what does it take to go from, say, $100,000 a year to 120, or from 120 to 130? For the candidate, that means the world. And even in our crappy example we showed before, where there was a $50,000 loss on the practice due to that vacancy, even alone, you're still netting a great amount there. So you're investing in your candidate early on, and it will make an absolute difference. So talk about salaries. What are you seeing out there, and why should the practices consider increasing theirs to compete?
Sure. So I see it a lot of times, and everybody has a different reason for needing to hire somebody. Sometimes it's you want to spend more time with your family. Sometimes you just feel overworked and you need to take a few more days off, so you want to replace yourself for those few days. But sometimes it's because of growth. Maybe you hired an amazing marketer and there's just patients that are piling in and you're booked out for 2-3 months. And you know if you bring that other person in that you can generate a lot more revenue. You have an exam lane that's sitting there that's ready to be used. It's fully stocked with equipment and things like that. So what really happens is a lot of times that a doctor maybe hasn't hired another doctor for 10 years. And 10 years ago, $90,000 in your area might have been acceptable. And that might have been what other organizations were offering. But now you're going to get a candidate and you're going to offer them $90,000 and immediately they're going to be turned off. Because this is an understanding thing. It's understanding both ways. Obviously, the candidates need to understand that a business has expenses and things like that. At the same time, a business needs to understand that this new generation of practitioners has expenses, and those expenses are in the form of student loans that are astronomical. A lot of times the practice owner can't relate because the loans that they had when they came out of school were much smaller. They were there, but they were much smaller. So these candidates are going to be looking for a lot more money, and they're going to be able to get it. And why is that? Well, there's a few reasons. One of the biggest reasons is because there's likely a corporate practice in your area that's hiring that's going to be able to offer anywhere from $115,000 to $150,000 for this candidate.
Or just a smart practice.
Or just a smart practice out there that's saying, hey, I know that if I bring in an optometrist, I'm going to make more money. So they're going to bring them in, they're going to pay them because they know, again, you're looking at a scarce resource. The optometrist is the scarce resource. So you want to get them into your practice. And then you can figure out how to increase the revenue or increase your margins or do whatever do whatever you have to do on that side of things. But you need them in there because you're going to be losing all that revenue because your offer is poor. You got to get them up to that 115. Usually what we see if there's a difference between an offer, let's say that's 110 and 120,000, the candidate is going to look at the other things that you were talking about. The value, the patient population. Is this a medical practice versus a retail practice? Likely, if it's a millennial doc who was trained more in medical modalities, is going to want the medical practice. We see that all the time. These candidates also want that medical practice. Just as a side note, likely if you don't have medical in your practice, you can bring in a newly graduated associate who has that medical background, and you can add medical to your practice, increasing your revenue and also increasing the value of service that you can provide for the patients that come in.
Yep. I was talking with a candidate yesterday over a web conference, and he had two offers that were pretty much exactly the same, and he needed some advice. And ultimately, what we came out, the two predominating themes were, one, which practice is going to give you the least burnout? Where can you, enjoy going to work every day and not feel like you're being stressed? Like, who has their act together more was the advice. And secondly, where is the most upward mobility? So we're talking about salary, but your ability to grow is also another big piece that people are looking for, whether that's in a more leadership position or whether it's just an equity position as a partner. Those things are very important and really well considered. In this situation, both companies very much so seem to have similar ethos, similar mission, similar philosophy, and so that was a wash. But for this particular candidate, that mattered, and he was only speaking with practices that had that. There was actually a hospital he was potentially working with as well, and that did not have as much interest for him, particularly because he felt that it was just a hospital. There wasn't necessarily this bigger mission. It was more of a, this is what we've got to do. And so he wanted to be part of something private where he felt like there was kind of a cause he was fighting for in a way.
And, a big thing you can ask people is, what do you value? Is it salary? Is it patient population? Is it the amount of patients that you're going to have to see? Is it a flexibility in your scheduling? Is it you don't want to work weekends? So this is another one. I see a lot of practices that are going to try to force that weekend day upon the doctor because they have patients that need to be seen on those weekends, but they haven't been able to find a doctor for 6 months or 9 months, and now you have this doctor who's willing to work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, or Monday, Tuesday, Friday, or whatever it might be, and they're still not bringing them in because they're trying to force that Saturday upon the doctor. Although I believe that Saturday is a great day. You should look for doctors that are going to want to work that Saturday. If you don't have a choice between multiple people and you are looking to fill your position and you've had a vacancy for 6 months or 9 months and you know that the person that you're going to bring in would be very happy at your practice working Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or whatever it might be, bring them in. I guess it's easy for me to say that sitting on the sidelines, but we've just seen it so many times. We've seen the practices that bring in those candidates and allow them to work that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then they continue to look for a doctor that maybe wants to pick up just Saturdays because they have extensive loans and because they're looking to make more money for whatever their reason might be. Maybe they want to take a vacation, so they're looking for fill-in days. You can figure other things out, but if you have an outstanding problem, that is, I've had a vacancy for a long period of time, bring that doctor in, work with them on the things that are important for them, and then you can figure out the other side of things later.
Well, I think that's the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more we can talk about. Matt at CovalentCareers.com, Brett at CovalentCareers.com. Check us out, give us a call. What's our direct number if people want to reach us?
It's 858-780-4450.
Yeah, go for it. We have so many numbers, I kind of forget.
Tons of numbers, for sure. That's the easiest.
So we're here for you, CovalentCareers.com, and we hope this was helpful and super informative. And hey, we're gunning for the our main goal. We've talked a lot about goals, is to make sure that new healthcare professionals have great, successful, and happy careers. That's what we're in it for, and because of that, we've been bringing in just truly some amazing talent, and they're looking. So we'd love to connect with the employers out there.
Any questions you have specific to your practice, whatever it may be, I know we couldn't cover every specific example here. If you have those specific questions, reach out to us. We might have some good answers for you. Maybe not, but most likely we probably will have at least some piece of knowledge from the experience that we've had working with 4,022 practices when it comes to hiring.
Awesome. Take care, everyone.